Welcome back to the Anti-Cancer Lab. Alegal, I'm glad you're here today, whether you've been watching for a while or this is the very first time you've landed on this channel. If it's your first time, this is the place where I read the cancer metabolism studies most people never see, and I land every single one of them on your plate. Nothing theoretical, nothing I can hand you at the grocery store. And today's topic is cheap, it's at any supermarket, and it actually holds up when you look at the research. Alegal. So grab a coffee, pull up a chair, and let's get into this together. Before I say anything else, I want to be clear about something, because this is a cancer channel, and that means I owe you a straight line right at the start. I am not a physician, I am not an oncologist, and I am not here to tell you what to do with your treatment. What I do is read the peer-reviewed literature, the metabolism papers, the trial records, the systematic reviews, and translate them honestly for people who don't have time to dig through the journals themselves. Nothing in this video replaces your oncologist, your care team, or any treatment you are currently on. This is educational. It belongs alongside your medical care, not instead of it. Alright, now let's talk. Here is where I have to be honest with you about something I got wrong for a long time. For years, and I mean years, I filed turmeric in the same drawer as all the other wellness aisle buzzwords. Golden milk, miracle spice, the kind of thing that gets 400,000 views on the internet and then quietly disappears when anyone asks for a clinical citation. I was skeptical, genuinely, and I stayed skeptical until I stopped reading the headlines and started reading the actual mechanistic research. Because there are two things happening when you take 1 teaspoon of turmeric with a pinch of black pepper at the end of days. Your eating window at night. Two distinct, verifiable mechanisms, and neither one of them is magic. They are biology. And once I understood the biology, I changed my position. I'll tell you exactly what I'd put on my own plate at the end of this video, because the practical instruction here is genuinely simple. But let me earn that by walking you through the science first, and I promise I will not waste your time. The first promised item, 1 teaspoon of turmeric powder, a pinch of black pepper, a small amount of fat, olive oil, warm milk, coconut oil, your choice, taken at the end of your last meal of the day. Then you stop eating. You don't eat again for at least 13 hours. That combination is the whole protocol. The rest of this video is me explaining why those two things matter, what the research actually says about each one, and where the honest limits of that evidence sit. Because there are limits, and I am going to name them plainly. Let's start with the way a cancer cell eats, because that's the foundation of everything else here. In 1924, over 100 years ago now, a German biochemist named Otto Warburg made an observation about cancer cells that earned him the Nobel Prize in 1931 and that we are still building on today. He noticed that cancer cells behave strangely when it comes to fuel. Normal cells burn glucose efficiently using oxygen. It's a clean, productive process. Cancer cells, even when oxygen is sitting right there available, prefer to burn glucose through a fast, sloppy, incomplete process called glycolysis, breaking it down to lactate instead. They take in far more glucose than they need, and they burn through it inefficiently. This is called the Warburg effect, the name the field uses for that abnormal, fuel-hungry, glucose-dependent metabolism that seems to be a near-universal feature of cancer cells. Think of it like a furnace that's stuck wide open. It burns through fuel constantly, and it can't easily switch modes. Now here's why that matters for tonight. A 2021 paper in CA, a cancer journal for clinicians, one of the field's most respected publications, described the Warburg effect this way. Cancer cells have an altered metabolism that relies primarily on glycolysis and results in increased glucose uptake and fermentation of glucose to lactate. And a 2022 narrative review, published on PubMed Central, added something important to that picture. Glucose deprivation may sensitize cancerous cells to additional stress, as shown in extended fasting and ketogenic diet models. There's also a concept called the differential stress response, which the same CA paper describes this way. Unlike normal cells, cancer cells are often incapable of switching into a stress resistance mode during fasting, because of the very mutations that made them cancerous. Oncogenes like RAS, AKT, and mTOR, the ones driving uncontrolled growth, may actually prevent cancer cells from going dormant when fuel runs low. Normal cells can hibernate. Cancer cells, in many models, cannot. But let me be careful here. This is mechanistic and animal research. The human clinical data on fasting and cancer is still developing. I will get to the most important human study on this in a few minutes, and I will tell you exactly what it shows and what it doesn't. But the biological logic of why an overnight fast might create a different environment for cancer cells, that logic is grounded in real, documented science. It's not a leap. It's a hypothesis with a strong mechanistic backing that is now being tested in people. That's pillar 1 of tonight's protocol. What happens in your body when you stop eating for 13 hours? We will come back to the human data. But first, let's talk about what turmeric does and what it doesn't do when you take it. Midata mida, I want to start with the compound, because that's where the mechanism lives. Turmeric is the spice. Curcumin is the most abundant active compound inside turmeric, a curcuminoid, which is just the family name for a class of naturally occurring polyphenols found in the turmeric root. When researchers study turmeric and cancer in the lab, they are almost always studying curcumin specifically. So those terms get used interchangeably in popular media, but in the papers, they are distinct. Curcumin is the molecule doing the work. A 2024 review, published in Frontiers in Nutrition, the journal peer-reviewed, published May 28, 2024, described curcumin this way. Numerous in vitro and in vivo studies have demonstrated its ability to modulate multiple signaling pathways involved in carcinogenesis, leading to inhibition of cancer cell proliferation, induction of apoptosis, and suppression of metastases. Now, let me translate every one of those terms, because they each mean something specific, and I am not going to leave you with jargon. Carcinogenesis means the process by which a normal cell becomes cancerous. Inhibition of cancer cell proliferation means slowing or stopping cancer cells from dividing and multiplying. Apoptosis is the cell's own built-in self-destruct sequence. Every cell in your body has one, and cancer cells tend to find ways to disable it so they keep surviving. Curcumin, in lab and animal models, appears to help nudge cancer cells back toward triggering that self-destruct sequence. Metastasis is when cancer spreads from its original location to other parts of the body. One of the specific pathways curcumin appears to modulate is called NF-kappa B. A 2025 paper in Frontiers in Pharmacology and separately a clinical trials protocol from MD Anderson Cancer Center describe it this way. NF-kappa B is essentially a molecular on switch inside cells. When it's activated, it tells cells to keep surviving and keep proliferating. Suppressing NF-kappa B in cancer cells has been identified as a potential target for cancer prevention and treatment. Curcumin, in cell models, is a potent downregulator of that NF-kappa B activation. The 2025 Frontiers in Pharmacology paper confirmed that curcumin modulates NF-kappa B, PI3K/AKT, and WNT/beta-catenin, three separate signaling pathways involved in cancer cell behavior. That's not nothing. That's a compound with a documented multi-pathway effect on the molecular machinery of cancer cells, in a dish, in an animal model. And this is where I have to slow you down, because this is the exact moment where the internet takes a real finding and makes a claim the evidence does not support. Wait, let me back up and say this clearly. All of that, the NF-kappa B work, the apoptosis data, the anti-proliferative effects, that is in vitro and animal research, dish and animal research, not yet people trials at the clinical scale that would justify calling this a treatment. The human clinical trial record on curcumin is real, it exists, but it is mixed. A 2024 systematic review, the most comprehensive human trial analysis I found, included 34 randomized controlled trials involving 2,580 patients, primarily with head and neck cancer, breast, prostate, and colorectal cancer. The studies reported heterogeneous results. Significant findings were reported for specific outcomes like oral mucositis and weight loss in cancer patients. That's a real signal. It is not a cure and it is not a clinical recommendation. Mayo Clinic, updated January 5, 2024, put it this way. At this time, there isn't enough evidence to recommend curcumin for preventing or treating cancer. Lab and animal research suggests it may help, and research is ongoing. That is the honest summary. I will not give you more than that, because I don't have it. Now here's the part most people completely miss. And honestly, it's the most practical piece of information in this entire video. Even if you believe the lab evidence on curcumin, even if you are convinced the mechanism matters, there is a serious problem with simply swallowing turmeric and walking away. The problem is bioavailability. Bioavailability is how much of a compound actually makes it into your bloodstream, where it can do anything at all. Curcumin has genuinely poor bioavailability on its own. A 2025 paper in Frontiers in Pharmacology put it plainly. Curcumin's clinical application is limited by poor solubility, rapid metabolism, and low systemic bioavailability. In plain English, your liver grabs it and breaks it down before it can get anywhere useful. This process is called glucuronidation. The liver's natural detoxification system tags curcumin for rapid clearance. Most of what you swallow never reaches your tissues. And here is where black pepper earns its place at the table, literally. A 2025 paper in Food Science and Nutrition, citing a landmark 1998 study by Shoba and colleagues that has been confirmed in multiple reviews since, found that curcumin's bioavailability can be significantly enhanced by up to 2,000% within 45 minutes in humans when administered with piperine. Piperine is the active compound in black pepper. It inhibits glucuronidation. It slows down the liver's breakdown process, and it does this in humans, not just in a dish. This is one of the most well-established practical findings in the curcumin literature. 2,000% is not a typo. That is the magnitude of the difference between taking turmeric alone and taking it with a pinch of black pepper. A small amount of fat also increases absorption. Olive oil, coconut oil, or warm whole milk all work, because curcumin is fat-soluble, meaning it dissolves better and absorbs better in the presence of fat. So the protocol of 1 teaspoon of turmeric plus a pinch of black pepper in warm milk or with a small drizzle of olive oil is not just a cooking habit. It is how you actually deliver meaningful amounts of the compound into your system. I'll tell you what I would actually put on my own plate here. 1 teaspoon of turmeric powder, a pinch of black pepper, and I mean a pinch, you don't need much, stirred into a small warm cup of milk or an oat milk equivalent. Maybe a half teaspoon of raw honey to help it go down if you want it. There is actually some early in vitro research on honey and cancer cell cytotoxicity. One MDPI paper published October 31, 2024, summarized growing research suggesting honey may display anti-cancer effects. But I want to be clear that is dish research, not people research. And I mention it only so you know the honey carrier is fine, not harmful. The timing matters here too, and I'll explain that in a moment. Now let me tell you about the study that genuinely changed how I think about the overnight fast. In 2016, a researcher named Catherine Marinac at the UC San Diego Moores Cancer Center published a study in JAMA Oncology, one of the most prestigious cancer journals in the world. She and her colleagues analyzed data from 2,413 women with early-stage breast cancer and looked at one simple variable. How many hours per night did these women go without eating? The finding was striking. Women who fasted fewer than 13 hours per night had a 36% higher risk of breast cancer recurrence compared to women who fasted 13 or more hours. 36%. From 13 hours of not eating, no drug, no supplement, no expensive protocol, just the length of the overnight window. Marinac herself described it this way: prolonging the overnight fasting interval may be a simple, non-pharmacological strategy for reducing a person's risk of breast cancer recurrence and even other cancers. She also said, and I want to quote this carefully, 10, that previous research has focused on what to eat for cancer prevention, but when we eat may also matter because it appears to affect metabolic health. A 2024 systematic review, published on PubMed Central, confirmed a statistically significant association between prolonged nightly fasting and lower disease recurrence risk in a cohort of breast cancer survivors. 10. Now here is what I am obligated to tell you, and I will tell you plainly because this audience deserves it. This is an observational study. It shows an association between longer overnight fasting and lower recurrence risk. 10. It does not prove that fasting caused the reduction. Experts reviewing the study noted that much more research is needed before making any conclusions about fasting and recurrence. Observational means we are watching what people do and seeing what happens to them. We are not randomly assigning fasting to one group and measuring the outcome in a controlled trial. The association is real and it is meaningful, and it is published in JAMA Oncology. The causal chain is not yet established in a clinical trial. Both of those things are true at the same time, and you deserve to know both. I know what some of you are thinking right now. You're thinking, this sounds like every other food miracle I've heard for the past 10 years. Turmeric, black pepper, stop eating after dinner, and suddenly cancer is on the run. I hear you. That skepticism is healthy, and I'd rather you have it than not. Let me say what the cold, honest version of this is, because this channel only has one version. None of this is a cure. A teaspoon of turmeric does not kill cancer in your body the way a headline implies it does. The clinical trial record on curcumin in humans is mixed, incomplete, and does not yet support the clinical recommendation for cancer prevention or treatment. The overnight fasting data is observational. What we have is a compound with documented effects on cancer cell signaling pathways in lab models, a practical way to dramatically improve how much of that compound reaches your bloodstream, and one well-designed observational human study suggesting that lengthening your overnight fast is associated with meaningfully lower recurrence risk. What this shifts is odds, over time, in combination with everything your care team is already doing. That is the honest version. Anyone offering you more than that is selling something I'm not selling. Let me say that more carefully, because I think there's a version of this that still undersells what the evidence actually shows, and I don't want to do that either. The Warburg effect is real. The differential stress response, the idea that cancer cells, because of their oncogenic mutations, can go into hibernation mode the way normal cells can during a fast, that is documented in legitimate research. The NF-kappa B pathway modulation by curcumin is documented in cell models, and the effect is large enough that MD Anderson ran clinical trials on it. The bioavailability data on piperine is one of the most robust practical findings in nutritional pharmacology. These are not made-up connections. They are real mechanisms with real research behind them, being studied at real institutions. The honest limit is that the human clinical data has not yet caught up to the mechanistic data, and I will always tell you where that line sits. There's a woman I want to tell you about. I'll call her Margaret. She wrote to me after her diagnosis, trying to figure out what to eat between her appointments, and her question was the simplest, most human version of everything I've been discussing for 20 minutes. Can I actually do something tonight? Not next year, not after a clinical trial publishes, not if she can afford an expensive supplement program. Tonight. And the answer, honestly, is yes. Not because turmeric cures cancer, and not because skipping your midnight snack is a treatment, but because the combination of taking curcumin properly, with the black pepper that gets it into your system, and then letting your body run a clean 13-hour overnight fast is doable tonight. It costs almost nothing, it has a biological rationale built on real research, and it has no downside for most people eating a reasonable dinner. That's a lever, a real one, and Margaret could pull it before she went to sleep. So here is your one thing this week. Pick up a bag of ground turmeric, standard grocery store, any brand. The powder is fine. Fresh turmeric root works too if your store carries it, and a jar of black pepper if you don't have one. That's it. The cost is under $5 total, and both will last you months. In the evening, after your last meal of the day, make this. 1 teaspoon of turmeric powder stirred into a small warm cup of milk, dairy, oat, almond, whatever you use, with a pinch of black pepper and a small drizzle of olive oil, or a half teaspoon of raw honey if you want it to taste better. Drink it. Then stop eating. Don't eat again for at least 13 hours. If you finish dinner at 7 in the evening, that means nothing until 8 the next morning. Coffee black is generally fine. Water is obviously fine. That 13-hour window is the anchor, not a grueling fast, not a deprivation protocol. Just a clean overnight break that lets your body's metabolic environment shift. The fat in the milk or the olive oil helps the curcumin absorb. The piperine in the black pepper dramatically increases how much curcumin makes it into your bloodstream. The overnight fast creates the metabolic context. That's the whole thing. It is genuinely that simple. A few practical notes before we close. If you are currently in active treatment, chemotherapy, radiation, or any oncological protocol, please bring this to your oncologist before you start. There are specific situations where fasting windows need to be modified, and curcumin at supplemental levels has been studied alongside chemotherapy in some trials, but it is not for everyone without a conversation with your team. That conversation is not an obstacle. It is part of how this works properly. This channel exists alongside your medical care, not in place of it. Also, I am not recommending a high-dose curcumin supplement here. There is no established human therapeutic dose for cancer prevention confirmed in the research, and I won't invent one. What I'm describing is food-level use, the 1 teaspoon of turmeric that you'd put in a recipe, paired properly. If you are interested in supplements, that is a conversation for your doctor. Here's where I want to leave you. Every day, you're making choices at the plate. 3 times a day, sometimes more. Those choices accumulate. The research does not say your plate is the whole story. Genetics, environment, history, treatment, all of it matters. But the research does say that what you put in your body, and when you stop putting things in your body at night, creates a biological environment that is either more or less hospitable to the things you don't want growing. You hold one lever every day, your plate. Use it and let your team do the rest. Be the person who does the doable things consistently, alongside the best medical care available, and doesn't wait for a perfect study before taking one reasonable step tonight. If you found this useful, and I genuinely hope you did, the simplest thing you can do is hit the subscribe button and ring the bell. Because I put out new research every week, and I don't want you to miss the ones that matter most. Tell me in the comments which one you're starting with. I read these. I want to know if you're already doing a turmeric tea at night, or if this is new to you, or if you've tried it and want to share what you noticed. This community is how I learn what questions to answer next, and your experience matters here. Keep it simple, keep it on your plate, and I'll see you right back here. Bring a friend who needs this.